From the Grand Ballroom at Executive Caterers at Landerhaven, thank you for joining us as we celebrate more than 20 years of presenting important and timely discussions. Corporate Club is the direct link for community leaders to connect with regional businesses, government, and nonprofit organizations. This series of programs deals with those issues and persons that impact on the lives of those who live in Northeastern Ohio. Corporate Club at Landerhaven begins right now.
Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us today. This is the Corporate Club at Landerhaven, a very exciting panel today. Going to have a good time talking. The subject matter is 2020 hindsight. In other words, the lessons we have learned over the years. We have on the far left over there Mike Benz, former president of the United Way. In the middle, Jerry Sue Thornton, the good-looking one here today, by the way, former president of Tri-C. And right next to me, Terry Stewart, former president of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So much to talk about, but first, guys, I wanted to talk about when you first took on these positions, the special challenges that you faced. And Mike, you faced a lot of challenges when you first took over at the United Way.
Yeah, when you're recruited, they tell you one thing, and when you get there, something else happens. I guess you start with a brand new place, brand new people. United Way had been in the background, and so it was a matter of calling on a lot of your friends and a lot of the people here in the audience, not only the ones I work with now, but the ones I've worked with in the past, is who you call on. And this community is a giving community, and so building relationships, which became probably the critical thing, whether it's the relationships with my wife of 44 years, that's a paid political announcement, or my 5 kids and 14 grandchildren, that's the base, right? And then you call on people like Jerry Sue Thornton and Terry Stewart and others. It's kind of like when we were at the Rock Hall. It's like putting the band back together. It's a little help from our friends. And I think that was a big challenge, but a great opportunity to build relations that continue on today. And the places I've worked, the partnership and Cozy and at Cuyahoga Community College in the past, not just worked, but been a volunteer trustee, they're like my family. And having the privilege of having Jerry Sue make the motion to hire me at United Way in the board meeting. She was on that board in the early days, and I worked with Chuni and Paniki. And so, if you go around and you say, it's a big circle and it's a family. And if you're smart enough, and I'm not saying I was smart enough, but a lot of other people advised me, get a lot of people involved, help paint their face in the picture. That'll make the tough jobs, because you can settle financial issues, you can settle fundraising issues, you can settle governmental, whatever it is you have a lot of people in the game. And thank God we have a lot of people in the game in this community. And so that's kind of what I faced and what I went about and did literally with tens of thousands of people that engaged in making our community better.
And I think the theme we're going to hear today is the importance of having good people around you. Jerry Sue, I didn't realize you were in charge of Tri-C for so many years. 21 years. When you first took over, what were the challenges that you faced there?
When I first started, I thought there probably weren't many challenges because it was a well-run institution. It had a great history. It was very embedded in the community, but I didn't read the fine print where it said that over 42% of the funding came from a local county ballot issue, which meant that every 5 years the college has to go back to the community to ask for renewal of its funding. And I started in January of 1992, and we were on the ballot in May of 1992, which meant very quick fundraising to launch the campaign, and that had to all be privately raised, as well as getting out and making sure that voters understood what we needed, what we were trying to do in the community, how we were using those dollars. And so it was a very quick, fast campaign. But the fact of the matter, there was a great team internally to help with that. But that's just something in the fine print that you don't necessarily read, that every 5 years, very much like a political candidate, you're back out to the voters. And that can be very challenging.
Financing is obviously a critical thing. Terry, you faced a lot of that, obviously. We see this beautiful, shimmering piece of glass there on the lake, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You took over when, 1999?
Yep.
And what were the challenges that you faced? What did you see when you first took over to say, uh-oh, we have a lot of work ahead of us?
Well, as we mentioned before folks got here, the three of us are almost terrible how related we are and all these things, because Mike was my predecessor and Jerry Sue was on the board before it was built. But after Mike's period, which was a stable period at the beginning, we had so many directors, one a year for many years, and it was the opportunity that brought me here. At the same time, you had to understand how that turnover and the leadership cascaded through the organization for about 4 or 5 years, and what did that do to the business model? What did it do to the board? Really, my biggest challenges were really trying to figure out how do you really run something called a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There's no legacy for giving to something called rock and roll. This was the first big music museum that had ever been built. Country music was a small entity at the time. So the whole business model was at risk. The board had sort of been fractured and shattered. And the staff was just doing whatever they felt like they should do and sort of moving on their own. So you really had to put all the pieces back together and try to make it work.
Talk to me, all of you, about leadership styles. I look at dynamic, strong leaders, even successful coaches, and they all seem to have the certain personality. How would you characterize your style, Terry, and how you were able to right the ship over there at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Well, I've always been very participatory. I have an open door policy. At the same time, it's all about building a good staff. And fortunately, within a fairly short time, we were able to put together all the major players there. And then what you want to do when you're running an organization, my situation, is you have your own vision, where you want to go, what you want to achieve, but you want a staff that's very supportive and one that feeds you information. And as I always said to my folks, I hope that you can change my mind on some of these ideas, because it means you've learned something, you know something I don't know. But at the same time, you have to be strong enough and have enough of an insight into what you're doing, that when that question mark comes up, should we go left or right, you say, I may be wrong, but we're going to go right, and if that's not correct, then we'll change that. It's about making decisions with a lot of support from your staff. At the same time, you can't fix a non-decision. You can always change something that you do wrong. Mm-hmm. So it's really sort of bringing all the pieces together and help you drive your own vision through the company.
I've worked with a lot of bosses that said, hey, I have an open door policy, and you walk in the door and they throw you out right away, because not my current boss, by the way. Need to say that.
Smart move.
Yeah, that was very important. Jerry Sue, how about you as a leader? I'm sure you face the same kind of issues Terry and Mike also face.
Well, I think throughout my tenure, the leadership's been pretty much the same as it was when I walked in the door. It was a matter of assessing the skills, the talents, the strengths of the people that you're working with, finding out who can do what. Very early on, I had to turn the operational part of the college over to one of our executive vice presidents, because I was out in the community making sure that voters understood how we were using their dollars. So at the very beginning, I had to assess other talent in the institution. I've tried to do that all along and really let people do their jobs, working with them to support them, working to ask the questions as to how they are moving along toward the goal. But ultimately, you have to hire good people, let them do their jobs, be there for them, ask questions, encourage them, get to the finish line, because you are a team and you have to trust their instincts, because yours may not always be the best. But in that leadership, there are a lot of leaders in institutions, and there are a lot of leaders at Cuyahoga Community College. So the leadership wasn't vested in me only as president. It was really throughout the college, vested in faculty, staff, students even, in their leadership roles, stepping forward, coming forward with the things they needed to help them learn. Mm-hmm. So it really, I think leadership, Lou, is throughout an organization. It's not vested in any one position. But you have to remember, the buck stops with you. It does.
Mm-hmm. And Mike, that's exactly what I was going to ask you. You talked about building relationships and getting ideas from people, but ultimately, you're the guy that has to make that final decision.
Yeah, I guess I would say that I don't think I could sell it to this group that I was this laid-back, open leader, mm-hmm. laissez-faire, quiet. On the other hand, there is a moment in time that you do have to make a decision, and they can be out of crisis. I remember standing on the deck the day after 9/11 with the entire team. I remember bringing everybody together out of instinct, not out of a rule book, a playbook. That's experience, that's emotion. I think a word that really transcends the three of us and usually successful people. And I now can say I think I'm on the verge of having some success in my life. It's a big word. It's called care. Passion and caring. And if you care, at that given moment when it could go left or right, and they're looking to you, well, you have all the answers. No, you don't have all the answers. You try to ferret it out from all the good advice you get from good people, in my case, volunteers and staff. But at some point, whether it's an emergency or it's a crisis or it's an opportunity, somebody's got to say, this is what we're going to do. And if you, over time, in this emotional bank of caring about things, have enough built up in your bank account, people will follow. The leader that doesn't get that, they're going to be out there by themselves, and somebody's going to be in the back with the saw cutting the branch off. So I think it is a matter of having the fortitude, the wisdom, but most importantly, at that moment in time, I can't put it in a bottle. There's something that leaders lead, as simple as that sounds. And you learn it over time. You're not born with it, and you can't learn it necessarily only at Tri-C, which I attended as a student. I met my wife at Tri-C. I've been on the board. I've been the chairman of the foundation. And so Tri-C's been a part of my life a long time. But you can't even learn it there. You've got to learn it from experience and experiencing it. And sometimes you make mistakes. And you got to be smart enough not to try to let that happen again. But there's a moment. We had a flood. I mean, water's coming in the front door, coming in the back door. We had a flood downtown when a backhoe hit a main water line.
I remember that.
And you stand there, my head of maintenance he's trying to figure, and I finally, you have to take control and say, okay, we're getting the band, get the people out of here, get them away from the electrical, and boom, 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 boom. It doesn't make any difference if you know about floods or maintenance or whatever. You got to know about leadership and leading people and being directive. That doesn't mean that works all the time. And it's managing in the gray, not the black or the white, managing in the gray, that I think I've learned over time, and I'm still learning, because the minute you stop learning and you don't value people, and that's the other word I would use, is value people, I think you're pretty much done.
Well, I love the way they're all helping me along with this interview, because you're leading me to another question. You didn't start out, any of you, as big-time executives. I appreciate your assistance. Big-time executives, but you did start from the ground up when you talk about learning things along the way. Again, we'll go across here. Terry, as you started out in your work career, what were some of the things you learned along the way? And perhaps it was just, I tell my son, watch your bosses and what you don't like. When you become a boss, learn that and don't do it. I mean, what did you learn along the way that helped you out when you became the top man at the Rock Hall?
I would say everything.
Everything.
Because, I'm somebody who was in school for 10 years. So all I wanted to do was make enough money to buy all the records I needed and go to all the shows I wanted to go to. And I quickly found out in the corporate world of America, because I did have real jobs before rock and roll, that you have to work hard and you have to work with good people. Half of what your salary was, used to be a saying, half of what your salary was what you learned from the people you worked with before. So you try to absorb as much as you could there possibly. And I never had any instincts that said I should run anything. It wasn't until a guy called me one day and said, you have 100,000 comic books, you ought to run Marvel Comics. And I went, that's a damn good idea. I wish I'd thought of that. So I was never a route I was on to run or be a leader of anything. I sort of, as you suggested, learned step by step. Once I was fortunate enough to get in a position of leadership, you sort of put the pieces together and you start to understand what it takes to be successful. And then the big challenge for me when I came to Cleveland is I've been on a lot of boards in New York, not-for-profit boards, including the UNICEF board, which is a giant board for the United States. And I knew something about not-for-profits. My big challenge, I came here and I had to shift gears from a for-profit, earnings per share kind of situation to a not-for-profit. And when you go from earnings per share to mission, it's a very, very different world. It's about cash flow, but it isn't. So, you have to certainly change gears, but you realize also that what I knew in finance, what I knew in accounting, what I knew in marketing would still apply to running an organization like this. So it's bits and pieces along the way, and then being lucky enough to have run something before I got here. That was very helpful.
Jerry, so you were nodding throughout all of what Terry was saying. You agree wholeheartedly.
I do, and I was just thinking as Terry was talking that I have gone between two worlds, the world of not-for-profit and the world of for-profit, and there are so many things to learn from each one. I serve on several corporate boards here in the Cleveland area, and I have also served on corporate boards outside of Cleveland over the years, and so you do learn from the different segments, because I was just thinking about shareholders, and in the not-for-profit, really your shareholders are the people you're serving. And so in many ways, there are similarities and yet there are differences. For example, in the not-for-profit world, you don't have any bonuses to give. You don't have some of those ways in which you can reward people, so you have to think of intrinsic rewards so much differently. But there are learnings among the two, between the two, as you're moving forward. I think part of my leadership growth and development was at each stage of my career and in each location. I was in Chicago, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and then Cleveland, around the Great Lakes. And what I really learned, not only from those above me and who went into positions before me, but to those people who I worked with side by side each day, trying to see how they thought, how they made decisions, what successes they had, what failures. And then looking at my own failures and always asking the question, what did I learn? Not dwelling on the fact that it didn't succeed, but what did I learn from that next time I can do better or do differently?
Well, that all makes sense, and Mike, you certainly would agree that step by step, learn every step of the way.
Yeah, because I learned after the third time I broke my nose to kind of move when they throw the punch. I guess one of the other things I wanted to add, it's step by step, because, mentors, which we've all had. Dick Pogue sitting in the office doesn't know I was going to mention or that I even saw him. Chuck Chuney and Vince Panicki, Jerry Sue Thornton. There are so many people, and now today, Brian Marita, there are so many people that play, this, put their arm around you and say, look, genius, you need to think about this one. Now, you can take that one of two ways. You can either ignore it and get killed, or you could say, you know what, maybe you ought to listen. Because I remember I went to Danville, Illinois to run Chamber of Commerce at 27 years old. Big shot. I belonged to the country club. I was like the guy. Population of about 50,000 people. My first radio interview, I went into WDAN Danville, 5,000 clear channel watts. And after the pleasantries, the guy said, look, so what do you think about the public transportation issue we're facing? And I had that look on my face.
Like you didn't know what he was talking about.
And, you're on radio, so you can't see. And so I did the politically correct thing. I said, to some people, it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And others, it's a sheer impediment that just gets in the way of everything. And he goes, oh, that's so right, and I walked out of there. And I said to myself, you are the biggest jackass that ever walked this earth. And from that moment, I learned, don't go unprepared.
Yep.
We prepared for today. Dick, who, and Vince Panicki and Chuck Chuney, these are guys that literally invested out of their own pockets for my future and my career. And, I remember words like, look, son, you're used to driving a high-speed powerboat. Okay? When you turn the wheel, that baby comes around. In an institution like, and Terry has agreed to head up United Way as one of the co-chairs, even after his quote-unquote failed retirement like mine and Jerry Sue's. And it takes people that continually give when it's not necessarily expected, they have no agenda, that make the difference in people's lives. You never know what those little words, okay, like it's a high-speed powerboat you think you have, but it's an ocean liner. And when you turn it, it eventually is going to come about. You got to gain some patience. And I'll never forget those words of wisdom. And on occasion, a kick in the behind, because we all need them.
Well, you mentioned your mistake. It was at WDAN in Danville, Illinois. And, big corporate executives here, very successful people, but we've all made mistakes. I don't want to put you on the spot, Jerry Sue, but in your long career, what mistake did you make? Maybe there's more than one that you have learned from.
Why didn't you start with Terry?
I can do that. I figured I'd give him a second to think about it.
No, I'm just
I
kidding.
didn't know you cared.
I'm kidding. I think the best skill and the greatest skill is listening. And I suspect that all of us fail to adhere to that as much as we should. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I've made overall in my career is not listening enough. And sometimes you feel like you have to act, and you have to act now, and you have to act quickly. And maybe you really don't. And maybe listening more gives you time to formulate the better solution, the better response to something. And so I would say, for any future leader out there that I was advising, I'd say really hone in on the listening skills in a deeper way. You get so many different impressions, good advice coming at you. Sort it through, take your time, and incorporate all that into the forward direction you're going.
In other words, take a breath and count to 10 before you do anything. Now, you've had at least 10 seconds to think about it. How about you, Terry?
Well, I said earlier, it's hard to fix a decision, a non-decision, and I think the mistakes I've made have been particularly with individuals who weren't in the right places, letting those situations continue too long. And that goes into other things in business where in your heart you know you need to make a decision. It's a tough one. It has implications on people's lives or on business relationships. And you just hate like hell to do it, but the longer you wait, the worse it gets and the more damage it does. And even with individuals' lives, it's better that you find a way to get them to a place where they can be successful as opposed to thinking they're going to achieve that success. And you usually know after a certain amount of time. So, you know, there are a lot of things we all learn, but when I think about it, that's the one where I really look back and say, boy, I should have done something a little bit sooner, a little bit quicker.
Mm-hmm. Mike talked about the value of preparation. I think we all agree how important that is. And we were talking before the segment began out here today about guys like me, the news media, and how do you handle the news media. And I mentioned, Mike, that if I were advising a corporate executive, I would say, be upfront, be honest, get it over with, take your shot and move on. You seem to think that's the best way to deal with the media, correct?
Yeah, I mean, truth is really important you have to manage, and I don't mean manipulate, you have to manage because you have so many recipients of a message.
Yeah.
At least in our jobs, we have so many recipients. But I've always found, even if you have to say no, or I can't comment right now, and here's why I can't comment, is better than making the mistake of making it up as you go. It eventually comes back, and more importantly, they deserve to know. I've always treated the media, because of the positions I've had the opportunity to be in, as partners in this community. They really don't want to hurt you. And if they do want to hurt you, then the best thing to do is keep your mouth shut and not add to the pain. But that doesn't mean manipulate. It means tell the truth. And if you can't tell them, I can't tell you. I know you don't like that answer, but I can't tell you right now. And there'll be a time when we can do this. So for me, I've always tried to treat, it doesn't always come out that way. And there's been bad United Way reports when we changed the funding one time. I mean, we just got the heck kicked out of us. And the people that care, right? You know, you have tears in your eyes. It hurts if you have a half a brain. And so I try to have the media understand that they're part of this. While they're independent, they also have biases, but they're part of this. And if you hurt me, or you hurt the United Way, or you hurt the Rock Hall, or you hurt Tri-C, you're hurting our community and the people that need that. Okay? It's different from a corporate world. We have a community to worry about. We have the people in a community to worry about, and everybody's life is important. And so I think about those things. And if you have to say no, you say no straight up. But you also, when the opportunity is, you pre-brief them. Tell them ahead of time, not after the fact. So to me, being proactive is the other key I would think is important.
Isn't part of this, and it's what you've been talking about here, reputational? I mean, you and I go back maybe 30 years. So when you would tell me something, I would say, okay, he's good for that. But you do have to build up that trust, don't you, Jerry Sue, with the media, have that relationship where you can say, hold off on that for now. I will answer your question as soon as I can.
Sure, and I think that it's very important to get to know the people who are the leaders in the media. And you know, the media is diverse. There isn't one media when you think about it. Radio, TV, newsprint, and now online. It's very different. Magazines, so you've got different audiences who are interested in different parts of the message. It does help to know the people behind the scenes, publishers, editors, writers, to be able to give them a sense of the stories that they're looking for, the stories that they think that their audience is interested in, their readership, their viewership. And so I think to look at the media as one entity is just not appropriate or accurate, but trying to, again, know the people behind the media.
How about you, Terry? Then I'll ask a follow-up related to the media, but generally speaking, relationships with the media, how do you build them?
Well, what I found out when I got here was that everybody had an opinion about how the Rock Hall should run, and everybody had an opinion of what should be in the Rock Hall. And that caused me a few problems, okay? So I had to get to know the individuals involved. I had to obviously be truthful and forthright. I found out I also had to disagree with them. A lot of them came at it from a direction that our mission did not allow us to take those positions. People want us to be a conduit to the musical industry for everybody, every musician in town. Examples like that are things that you really have to set straight right up front and say, look, that's not who we are, and that's not what we do. I learned quickly, both from my board and from mentors like these folks here on stage with me, that with major issues, as Mike said, get out in front of them, seek out the media, don't let them find you. Go to them and try to take your story to them first. I also learned quickly that, as we all know, you come to understand that certain people in the media have a story they're going to tell. And once you find out what the story is, you can decide whether you can change that story. And when that happens, quite often it was much better if my head of marketing and PR dealt with the story and kept me in reserve. Because sometimes you're not going to get to the conclusion they want you to, and they're just going to keep pounding you for it. So there's a lot of sophistication. There's a lot of even weaving and bobbing that goes on at the time you need to make sure that you set the story up and you can tell it the correct way. But when it gets down to it, it's about honesty. It's being truthful. But you can't step away from who you are and what the institution does. You can't let the media influence you into trying to make them happy with your story and tell them something they want to hear when it's really not what you're going to be doing.
All right, so you're watching TV one night or reading the paper and you get hammered in the media. And let's say, for starters here, the criticism is a fair criticism. You're reading that, you're watching it on TV. What's your next step? What do you do in terms of, and we'll start with you again here, Terry, with your staff, and how do you deflect some of that, or do you even deal with it? Do you just let it go?
Well, when it's a fair criticism, you have to first decide, well, you drop kick the cat into the other room because you're mad that it came out. Let's be honest, you get that venom out of your system, because we all, Mike mentioned it, I have so much passion for the institution and I care so much about it, and you always think you're righteous about what you're doing, but you're not, or you made a mistake, or there's something you missed, or there's a story that hasn't been told. So, the main thing is, like all this face, you then have to decide, is it a story you respond to, no matter how correct it may be, or is it one that you say, okay, we'll just let that drift? And that's a fine line. Every case is different, and when necessary, if it's a difficult enough, big enough issue, you're going to go to your board, you're going to go to your staff, you're going to figure out, and then you'll have some measured response about it.
How about you?
Lou, his cat now has boxing gloves. I've seen his cat. He's got a big cat. This cat has learned to defend itself. First of all, I think you hope that the media will do the research that's necessary on any topic. And that the speed of getting the word out won't overshadow the need to do the research and really find the facts and get behind the headline to what the facts really may be. If it's a negative story, and if it was a truthful, worthy negative story, again, you try to analyze what could you have done differently, what could you do differently with your team, how can we fix this problem if it's a problem, and begin to be proactive, not dwell on the negativity of whatever it is, but how can we work to make this right, work to change whatever the dynamics were at the beginning of the situation. But that's no different from problem solving in any way in an institution or business. You're always trying to improve, to get better, and you do make mistakes. And so I think that organizations are human just as people are human, because we're all making up those organizations. And so yes, there will be instances where maybe the right decision wasn't made or a mistake was made. But you have to also think about all of the positive things that happen that may not have made the print, that you would like to have seen in print, that you'd like to see some of that positiveness in your hometown, the successes in your hometown. And I think that's the other side of it.
Before we take our break, Mike, answer that question, but also dovetail into what if there's a grievous mistake in the report and it's not fair, it's inaccurate, we know about the cat deal. I mean, what do you do then? I mean, you do have to respond, don't you?
The National Organization for Animals will be calling. Well,
It's a joke. Let me get that. My wife is saying, she knows how much I love my cat. I would never do that. But it was an example, Michael, of how you've got to vent yourself on this stuff before you go respond.
The better half of the Stewart family,
Exactly.
Sally, is sitting right out here. Hi, Sal. I guess the first thing is, you talked about this bank of relationship that hopefully you build up over a lifetime.
Yep.
And sometimes when the story's wrong, you have to pick it up. The thing that you're not going to do successfully for a long time is either try to bulldoze, right? It's to have this relationship ongoing. So I think if I called you and said, Lou, look, this is not good, there would be, could I go on and at least tell what I think is going on and bring some information? At least that would be an open question for you and your producers. I think the same thing in written media and so forth. It's not always that way, and sometimes they beat you up, and you know that if it's repeated and repeated by you adding to it, that's a bad idea. So you just, retractions are printed on page 89, right? So you just let it go, and it hurts. Anybody that says that you don't pay an emotional price if you head an organization, that you have to just suck it up on occasion, and you want to go and not just kick the cat, that's a joke. You want to grab the reporter and the producer, right, or the writer or the editor, and beat the living crap out of them, which you may or may not be physically capable of doing.
But that's your first reaction.
But that's not my United Way in the sense that I own it, or my Tri-C, or my rock and roll. It's the communities, and in fact, in some of these institutions, it's the countries or the worlds. And so when you react like that, you can react for yourself, but you're never off duty. You're never off duty. You're constantly building relationships. You're constantly thinking about how it all comes out. And as I believe all of us do, we care about how it all comes out. Whether it's our new president of Tri-C, Dr. Johnson, hi Alex, or any of the others that are running institutions, you do care how it comes out. And on occasion, that's why I have my boss, Louise, sitting at home that kicks me in the behind and says, get over it.
Yeah.
Or my 16-year-old son, when I was recruited back to the Rock Hall, this is a true story, folks, when I was recruited back to the Rock Hall, kind of with an emotional gun to my head, to get back in the game and help save it with a group of people before, it was physically built. I had tears in my eyes every night. And Patrick, my son at 16 at that time, tore the ad out of the paper from Nike that said, just do it.
Wow.
Okay?
Nice.
That's not the dad I know.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need that. You need it from colleagues, you need it from friends, you need it from mentors, you need it from bosses, you need it from kids that finally get you. And sometimes you need it from the media, who, by the way, they are citizens of your community. And once in a while, you can call on that emotional bank and say, look, we need your help.
Agreed. Would you all agree the conversation has been fascinating so far? That was my call for applause. We're at the Corporate Club at Landerhaven, and we'll be back with more scintillating conversation right after that. Welcome back, everybody, to the Corporate Club at Landerhaven. Yeah, I should get the name right. I think that's pretty important, right? We have three guests been talking to this afternoon: Mike Benz, Jerry Sue Thornton, and Terry Stewart. Going to take some questions from the audience here in just a jiff. So come up with some ideas, and we'll take your question. But before we get to that, I wanted to talk about. We were talking about leadership so much. I wanted to get into the inspiring of employees. I've talked to some people in your positions, executives who say, you know, we get 5% of our employees are going to be great and 5% are going to be terrible, and we're not going to be able to do anything with those people, but it's that big group in the middle that we need to rise up. Start with you, Terry. Your employees, how do you inspire the employees to not just mail it in, not just go to work every day, but to try to accomplish special things?
Well, I think the Rock Hall has a great advantage over some institutions, not necessarily the other ones represented here, but 90-some% of the people that work at the Rock Hall fought very hard to get there. The music was so important to them, the history of rock and roll, how it changed their lives. So you start out with an excited base of folks that really don't want to be anywhere else for the most part. That gave me a distinct advantage. I think then, like anybody who runs anything, you have to do a good job of leading them and doing most of the right things so they feel like they're heading in the right direction. There are all sorts of things that you do when you have an institution like the Rock Hall, which involves events and getting to do special things that always will cause folks to react. But at the same time, what's the most important is let them know where we're going, let them know what they're doing and why we're going in a certain direction, and let them know the difference they're making in the community in Cleveland. The Rock Hall is such an important economic institution for Cleveland in terms of impact economically. Also, it's a marquee for the world. And you want them to feel to be part of that every day, that they're all integral. And when you have 500,000 people a year coming from around the world where they've wanted to be there for so long, you want to make sure that everybody realizes that they're likely going to be the one interface they're going to have with the institution on a daily basis. So you really want them to know how important they are and make them feel like they're part of the end result that's really going to change Cleveland for the better.
All right, work life can be dry sometimes, year after year after year. How do you keep people inspired?
Well, you know, I think just like Rock and Roll and United Way, it's the mission. Cuyahoga Community College's mission is extremely important, and people choose to work at a place because they resonate with that mission. So it's not, and now for the new president, and it wasn't for me, difficult to keep people engaged because they knew and they now know how important the lives are that are entrusted to them for education and training. So the mission often drives the passion. People will decide to be employed with a certain organization because they resonate with that mission. Does every day get to be sometimes a tough day, a boring day, a hard day? Yeah, for all of us. But I think taking people back to why they joined the organization at the beginning, that reason that they connected to the mission, if you can take them back to that, you can bring them up to a higher level of performance. Then the other thing I think Terry was mentioning, that you model the behavior that you are expecting others to demonstrate, that you as the leader have to make sure that you're willing to roll up your sleeves and do whatever you need to do for that organization. And then lastly, Lou, I think you inspect what you expect. As a leader, as a manager, as an executive within an organization, it's your job to ask the questions. Did we get this done? Are we doing this? Are we doing it in the right way? When people know that you're looking, that you care, that the end result is important, then there tends to be a little higher performance level. So I think those three things, but always go to mission.
Absolutely. We're going to hear from Mike on this as well, but I know we have some questions from our audience, so we can start right out here. Give us your name and pose your question.
My name is Frank Bird. I'm with Inside Business Magazine. And just to go along the lines of what you're talking about, you've all three of you are in this situation. How do you convey to community that without a margin, there is no mission? how do you get that out there and make people understand that part of what they have to do is contribute to the individual causes and make that vote for the levies and do the things that they need to do to, you know, donate to everyone?
Maybe that's best for you to start on that, Mike. We'll hear from everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll come right back to that, Frank. I think the part that Dr. Thornton and Terry were talking about from an inspiration perspective is you have to walk the walk. You got to show up at game time all the time, 24/7. That's one thing. Inspiration comes from, as they say, perspiration and dedication, but you have to be there all the time, even in the bad times. You're the first one that takes the bullet. And when the team knows that, that's part of it. Secondly, there's a saying at United Way that I helped introduce from somebody else. You use great leaders, and I'm not messing around. Gloria Moosman, who heads the Tri-C Foundation, and I talk about this a lot. You show up at game time. She's always there. This is probably her third career at Tri-C. And it's not the dollars, because I happen to know her, we're close personal friends, and so I see what she does, and she always shows up at game time, and she cares about people, and they see that inspiration. I think that there was a lady that ended up being the director of the Export-Import Bank one time, Maggie Califf, who since passed away, and Maggie had a saying, it's our responsibility with the conditions as we find them, not as we hope they'll be. And I made sure all of our team knew that. It's our responsibility. And I made sure they see the faces of the people they're helping, because it is mission driven, it is caring, it is about personal connection. It is not an employee, it's a partner, it's a friend. When they bleed, you bleed. At least that's, for me, been the most important part. Frank, when you talk about margin, and you have this bank that you hope you build up over time called a career or reputation, it's pretty easy when the mission is right and you're not exploiting it yourself. You're not in line first, you're in line last. It's not about Mike Benz or Jerry Sue Thornton or Terry Stewart. It's always been about what we do. And so at the end of the day, I think the community, those that, even the hardest of heart people, understand it is about economic development. It is about an education and a future and being able to take care of themselves. It is about sometimes people need a hand up, right? And so that's easy to sell. What's hard to sell is give me money for me, right? So I can exploit it, so I can be wealthy. And our salaries, all three of them, we talked about this earlier, were always published, okay? And I said, you don't want somebody in charge of raising $40 or $50 million or running an institution with 30 or 40,000 people or a worldwide institution. You don't want somebody low bid. That doesn't mean we're making $1 million, but you don't want low bid. You want a leader. It's not price driven, it's mission driven. And I think that's an easier sell, not always easy, and you do it on a personal basis. So I think that the margin really is the oil that helps run the engine, but they have to see the whole vehicle. They have to see, why are we doing this? And if you can't answer why, you get out of the business. Somebody once told me, my last point, when I saw the videos that my friend Dawn Southard helped create, when you see the video, if you don't have a tear in your eye when you are done with that video and feel that what you're doing makes a difference, you need to get out of the business. So I think it's all of that.
Well, I think that answer was so good and so complete that we're going to move on and take another question, because I know people out there want have some things to say. Go ahead, ma'am. What's your question?
Hi, I'm Desiree Meister of Blue Technologies. My question is just turned 30 years old myself, my first career job. What advice do you have people who are of my age to take away? What was your first position out of college, and what is the best takeaway that you had taking the next step?
I like it. Trey.
Standard answer. I'm fortunate enough to speak at high schools, colleges, bar mitzvahs, yard sales, garage openings, wherever they let me talk about it, about the Rock Hall, but I always add, you got to do what you love. You got to chase your dreams. I didn't get to Marvel Comics till I was 44 years old. I was lucky enough to speak at graduation at Ohio State last summer, and all I talked about for 12 minutes was chasing your dreams, and I had to say that to about 15,000 kids that were graduating in the worst economic time for recruitment. 1 out of 4 will live at home. They'll all walk away with the highest amount of debt they've ever had, kids have ever had for college. But it doesn't mean this isn't the right time for you to figure out what you really want to do. Every day you should go to a job that you never look at the clock, you run out of time, the days are too short. And I always said, if you're doing what you love, you'll never go to work. Every day's a weekend and every day's a vacation. And I promise you, in fact, I always do this. I double your money back guarantee on that. It'll happen that way. It really will.
Jerry Sue, a quick answer here because we have another question we want to take.
Sure. I agree with Terry. Life is too short just to work at a job. It's just too short. And so you end up spending hours and weeks and months doing something that is just painful. And you walk away not feeling that you made a contribution in any particular way. So sometimes it's hard because others discourage you to follow that dream. For example, I've been in education all my life, started teaching 6th grade and 11th grade, then community college. And there were lots of people who said, why are you going into education? You can never make any money. You can never do this. You can never do that. Why aren't you going into medicine? Why aren't you going into law, etc.? But the reality was I loved teaching, and I loved teaching and learning. And so my desire was just to follow that dream wherever it led me, however much I made over a lifetime I made. But walking away each day from a classroom or an office where you made a difference, that made me feel good and know that it was worth doing.
And I know I talk to my kids all the time who are in their 20s. You're going to be doing something for 40 years. And 40 years is a long time not to like what you're doing and to be miserable. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that go out and spend their lives like that. So at 30, if you can avoid that, go for it. We have another question over way in the back, I think. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Melissa from Maple Heights High School. And as you see here, we have lots of students that are probably juniors and seniors. And my question is, what advice would you give to them going into their careers? What 21st century skills would you want as an employee? What should they be doing now for their future? Not when they're 30, but right now. And also, I loved your answer about teaching.
Mike, why don't you start?
Yeah, I guess, following on what Dr. Thornton and Terry have said, I think my advice is to understand that life is a contact sport, that you need to engage all the time about everything. I think the word care comes to mind, and I mean that whether it's the studies, whether it's the career path. It doesn't get handed down on 2 tablets. There aren't those kind of rules. You get to make up the rules, and so the courses you choose should be ones that you want to have some fun, you want to make a difference, and you never get too lost in yourself. But it's a contact sport. My father, rest his soul, died at 58. But one of the things my father taught me is he said, take a glass of water, put your finger in it, pull it out. If you leave a dent, you're a big deal. If you don't leave a dent, you're not such a big shot. And I think that it is a contact sport. I think it is engaging. So many people cruise through.
Yep.
Kind of walk through the cemetery, and they really, the old axiom, there are 3 kinds of people in the world. Those that know what's happening, those that don't know what's happening, right? And those that make things happen. And I think, if you choose, I think you should be the people that make things happen. Take the game of life to life. And I really believe that it's a contact sport, and anybody can do whatever it is they want. Maybe not tomorrow morning, but enough other people put hurdles in front of people. They've done it my whole life, whether it was religion or age or this or that. At the end of the day, you just go out and do. As my son said, just do it. That is my best advice. Engage.
Which points to perseverance, not giving up, and I would suspect, Jerry Sue, that maybe you had some people early on in your career who said, you can't do that?
Well, absolutely, of course. But I think, I used to play golf, and I don't have much time to play golf. Now I'm going back to golf. But when you think about golf, you have sand and water on the golf course. If you focus in on the sand and water on the golf course, you will hit them. If you focus in on the challenges of life and career, you will hit them. But if you stay positive, if you keep a sense of humor, if you keep focused on what you're doing, if you include people, you've got all the ingredients for success. And if you just don't focus in on the fact that somebody doesn't think you can do something, or there's a challenge, or there's sand or water, that'll become where you hit. But if you keep positive, you can certainly succeed.
Passion and enthusiasm, Terry, go a long way.
Well, passion will make you better at anything you do. A young lady that's 30 years old. Passion will make you better at anything. And Jerry Sue mentioned earlier, you'll make more money because of that, or you're not meant to make money, but it will lead you down the right path. Now, I am going to go a little specific and talk about skill sets, because there are two things I feel very strongly about, one of which I'm pretty good at, and the other which my wife says I'm terrible at. In terms of skill sets, I think it's almost intuitive that your technology, your computer skills today should be as good as they can possibly be. It doesn't matter if you're going to be an engineer or whether you're going to be an artist, because so much turns and depends on that world. The one that gets lost sometimes, and this is the one that the people that have worked with me and worked for me, is accounting. As crazy as that sounds, accounting is sort of the way the numbers work in any position in life. If you get to run something, if you get to budget for something, you really should have basic skills in an area. And it's an area that most people avoid in liberal arts, and a lot of people avoid it in general. But if you ever get a chance to take that, that's why I send a lot of the folks that work for me, I actually send them off to 3- and 4-day accounting classes, so that when it comes to budgets and the way the machine works and on an annual basis, that they understand a little bit better. So technology, computers, accounting, but above all, passion, love what you do.
All right, now we're going to hear from somebody who is very important here at Landerhaven. You know who he is, Harlan Diamond. Harlan has some things he wants to say.
Thank you, Lou. Ladies and gentlemen, Terry Stewart, Dr. Jerry Sue Thornton, Mike Benz, I give you our past and the people who are helping to form our future. Thank you very much. You have humbled us by being here today.
I hope that doesn't mean we have to say goodbye. Does that mean we have to say goodbye? Yeah, that's it. All right. Unfortunately, we're done, but it's a great note to end on. Thank you, Harlan. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Corporate Club at Landerhaven. We appreciate it. Great conversation. Have a great rest of the day. Well done. Good job, sir.